Some tablets in the British Museum have a warning on them. Not a curse. Not a prayer. A warning to the reader. It reads, "Let the knowing instruct the knowing, and let him that does not know not read." This warning, documented by the Penn Museum, appears on certain Babylonian tablets from the library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh. It is the colophon of the Nisirtu. The hidden things. The protected texts. The knowledge the Babylonian temple system classified and sealed away from everyone except senior priests. These texts were not destroyed. The Babylonians believed that burning a text containing divine words could offend the god it referenced. So they were sealed. Stored. Kept in temple archives accessible to almost no one. And some of them describe a war. A war that does not appear in the Enuma Elish. In the Epic of Gilgamesh. In any surviving Babylonian text that was ever made available to the public. Scholars have known about this gap for over a century. What they found when they looked into it was not a missing story. It was evidence of a replacement. Welcome to the Shadow Ancestral. Every episode on this channel is built from documented evidence. Museum collections. Academic translations. Sources you can verify yourself. Tonight we go inside the Babylonian system of classified knowledge, the Nisirtu, and what it was hiding about Marduk. Subscribe right now if you are new here. Hit the notification bell. Every week on this channel, we go deeper. Now, let us start with the warning on the tablet. The colophon phrase, "Let the knowing instruct the knowing, and let him that does not know not read," was documented by a researcher examining a tablet from the Nippur collection at the Penn Museum. He found the same warning phrase on tablets in the British Museum's library of Ashurbanipal collection, discovered at Nineveh. This was not a casual inscription. It was the marker of a specific category of Babylonian temple knowledge called the Nisirtu. The Penn Museum's own journal, documenting this discovery, described it plainly. Each temple possessed its sacred library. Books on rituals of all kinds. Liturgies. Astrology. Medicine. Law. And some of these books, especially those that revealed the mystic meanings of stars, animals, and metals, carried this forbidding phrase. A tablet from the late period discovered in Babylonia and held in the British Museum contains the hidden meanings of the stars. It teaches how each star is the manifestation of the power of one of the gods. It belongs to the temple of Nebo at Borsippa. And it carries the warning, "Let the knowing instruct the knowing." The Nisirtu texts were not available to ordinary worshippers. Not to merchants. Not to soldiers. Not even to most priests. They were held by senior temple administrators, reviewed, classified, and deliberately withheld from general access. What was inside them was considered too significant, or too dangerous, for the uninitiated to read. And some of what was inside them was about Marduk. To understand what was erased, you need to understand what Marduk was before it happened. Before approximately 1800 BCE, Marduk was nobody. This is not speculation. This is documented by the Penn Museum's own Mesopotamian deity database, the Ordeal project, which states plainly. Marduk rose from an obscure deity in the 3rd millennium BCE to become one of the most important gods and head of the Mesopotamian pantheon in the 1st millennium. The EBSCO research database confirms the same thing. Marduk was initially worshipped as a minor agricultural deity associated with farming. His name translates, "bull calf of the sun." He was the patron god of one city. Babylon. A city that in the early 2nd millennium was not yet the dominant power in the region. He had no prominence in the broader Mesopotamian pantheon. No major role in the oldest texts. No seat at the divine council. And then, during the reign of Hammurabi, around 1792 BCE, everything changed. Babylon conquered southern Mesopotamia. And as the city rose, so did its god. By the time of Nebuchadnezzar in the 6th century BCE, Marduk had absorbed the attributes and roles of over 50 separate deities. 50 gods, merged into one, their names, their powers, their stories, folded into Marduk's identity. The scholars who study this call it theological evolution. The city rose, so the god rose. But the esoteric texts, the Nisirtu, describe a more specific mechanism for how it happened. And that mechanism is called the replacement. In 1849, British archaeologist Austen Henry Layard excavated the library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh. Among the tens of thousands of tablets he found, were 7 clay tablets containing a creation epic that opened with the words, Enuma Elish, when on high. The Enuma Elish. The Babylonian creation myth. The story of Marduk's rise to supremacy through his defeat of Tiamat, the primordial chaos dragon. Marduk kills chaos. Builds the world from her body. Creates humans from the blood of her defeated ally Kingu. Every Babylonian school child knew this story. It was recited annually at the Akita festival, the spring New Year celebration, read aloud to the assembled population by the high priest. State theology. Official history. The founding narrative of the most powerful empire in the ancient world. But here is what the scholars found when they examined it carefully. The World History Encyclopedia, drawing on the work of Assyriologists including Jeremy Black, states this plainly. The Enuma Elish in its present form, with Marduk as champion, is thought to be a revision of an even older Sumerian work. In the older version, Enki or Enlil played the major role. Not Marduk. Marduk only figures as prominently as he does because most surviving copies were made by Babylonian scribes. The Assyrian copy found at Ashur has the god Ashur in the main role, not Marduk. Because the Assyrians substituted their own city god into exactly the same structure. This is documented. Verified. And it raises the question that the Nisirtu texts appear to answer. If Marduk replaced an earlier god in the official creation narrative, what was the earlier account, and what did it say that made replacement necessary? We are at the halfway point. And what comes next is the part the Nisirtu texts were specifically written to contain. The esoteric accounts. The ordeal of Marduk. The Marduk prophecy. The war the official record does not describe. Subscribe to the Shadow Ancestral right now. Every episode on this channel is built from sources you can verify yourself. Subscribe. Hit the bell. Now, the hidden texts. The Enuma Elish was the public text. But there was another text about Marduk. One that was not recited at the Akita festival. One that was not taught to school children. One that circulated only among the senior priests of the Esagila, Marduk's temple in Babylon. It is called the Ordeal of Marduk. Or, the Tribulations of Marduk. Encyclopedia.com, drawing on academic Assyriological sources, documents it this way. Marduk's political fortunes are also mythologized in an esoteric text called the Tribulations of Marduk or the Ordeal of Marduk. The text is cast in the form of an esoteric cultic commentary. Esoteric. Not public. Not official. Reserved for initiates. The kind of text that carries the colophon, let the knowing instruct the knowing. What the Ordeal of Marduk describes is the period before Marduk's supremacy, when Marduk was not at the head of the pantheon, when something happened to him that the official Enuma Elish does not mention at all. The Cambridge University Iraq Journal, publishing academic research on Assyrian texts, documents the Marduk Ordeal text's own statement about its relationship to the Enuma Elish. The Marduk Ordeal text states that Enuma Elish, which is recited and chanted before Bel in Nisan, concerns his imprisonment. His imprisonment. The same Marduk who in the Enuma Elish is the triumphant champion of the gods, the creator of the world, the undisputed king of the divine order. In the esoteric text, was imprisoned. The Cambridge Journal notes that scholars have found this statement simply untrue, as a description of what the Enuma Elish actually says, because the Enuma Elish contains no account of imprisonment. And that is exactly the point. The Ordeal of Marduk describes something the Enuma Elish does not. A period of conflict. A period of defeat. A period that was removed from the public record, and kept only in the Esoteric archive. There is a third text. One that is not esoteric. One that is documented, translated, and publicly available. But one that describes a Marduk very different from the all-powerful god of the Enuma Elish. It is called the Marduk prophecy. Academic sources describe it as a vaticinium ex eventu, a prophecy after the fact. A text written as prophecy but describing events that had already happened. The Marduk prophecy describes the periods when Marduk's statue was taken from Babylon by foreign powers. The consequences, documented in the text, are catastrophic. Mad dogs roam the city biting citizens. Friend attacks friend. The rich beg from the poor. Brother eats brother. And the corpses block the city gates. This is not mythology. This is the documented memory of actual historical events, periods when Babylon was conquered, when Marduk's statue was removed, when the divine order collapsed into chaos. What the Marduk prophecy, the ordeal of Marduk, and the gaps in the Enuma Elish all point toward together, is a history of conflict around Marduk's position that the official record chose not to preserve in full. The World History Encyclopedia documents that the Enuma Elish was specifically composed, in the words of Assyriologist Alexander Heidel, by Babylonian priests to illustrate how the rise of Marduk came about and to sing the praises of Babylon and strengthen her claim to supremacy over all the cities of the land. It was political. It was deliberate. It was written to justify a conclusion, not to record a process. And the process, whatever conflict, displacement, and theological war preceded Marduk's final supremacy, was left to the Nisirtu. To the hidden texts. To the colophon that said, "Let the knowing instruct the knowing. And let him that does not know, not read." The final tablet of the Enuma Elish, Tablet 7, does something that no other ancient creation text does. It lists 50 names. 50 names of Marduk. Each name is a divine title that had previously belonged to a different god. Marduk absorbs them, one by one, with an explanation of why each title now belongs to him. Scholar Jeremy Black, cited by the World History Encyclopedia, describes this as Marduk becoming the embodiment of all divine powers combined. But think about what this actually means. 50 separate divine identities, 50 separate gods with their own histories, their own stories, their own roles in the cosmic order. Did not survive Marduk's rise. They were absorbed. Their names transferred. Their attributes reassigned. And whatever those gods had done, whatever wars they had fought, whatever positions they had held before Marduk took their titles, does not appear in the Enuma Elish. The 50 names section of the Enuma Elish is the theological equivalent of what the original script called, and what Babylonian administrative law would have called, a substitution. The original identities, replaced. The original accounts, superseded. The original record, cleaned and written over. Not destroyed. The Babylonians would not destroy texts containing divine words, but classified. Sealed. Put behind the colophon that said, "Let him that does not know, not read." Here is what the documented evidence actually shows. Before 1800 BCE, Marduk was a minor deity. This is confirmed by the Orac project at the University of Pennsylvania. Between 1800 and 1200 BCE, Marduk rose to supreme power through Babylon's political expansion. This is documented across every major academic source on Mesopotamia. The Enuma Elish, the creation epic that justified his supremacy, was a revision of an older text in which Enki or Enlil played the main role. This is confirmed by the World History Encyclopedia. The Ordeal of Marduk, an esoteric text kept in the Nisirtu archive, describes a period of conflict and imprisonment that the Enuma Elish does not mention. This is documented in encyclopedia.com and the Cambridge University Iraq Journal. And the final tablet of the Enuma Elish lists 50 divine names, 50 absorbed identities, whose original accounts no longer exist in the public record. This is the war the gods erased from us. Not a single battle. Not a single event. A process. A theological and political process by which an entire prior divine order, with its own stories, its own conflicts, its own version of how the cosmos worked, was absorbed, reclassified, and replaced by the Enuma Elish. The Babylonians did not burn the evidence. They sealed it. Put it behind the colophon. Kept it in the Nisirtu archive, where only the senior priests could read it. And when the priests were gone, when Babylon fell to Persia in 539 BCE, the Nisirtu archive went with them. What survived were the replacement texts. The public texts. The state mythology. The Enuma Elish, read annually at the Akita festival, the version of history that Marduk's priests decided the world should know. The colophon said, "Let the knowing instruct the knowing." The Babylonian priests who classified the Nisirtu texts understood something that the modern world has largely forgotten. Knowledge has a hierarchy. And the public version of history, the version recited at festivals, taught to children, repeated until it became the only version anyone knew, is not always the complete version. The Enuma Elish is a magnificent text. One of the oldest pieces of literature in human history. But it is also, confirmed by scholars at the World History Encyclopedia, the ORAC project at Penn, and the Cambridge Iraq Journal. A revision. A text that placed Marduk where an older god had stood. And what that older god was doing before Marduk arrived. What conflict preceded the replacement, what the 50 absorbed names were doing before Marduk took them, is in the Nisirtu, which is now gone. If this video moved you, subscribe to the Shadow Ancestral right now. Leave a comment. Do you think the Babylonian priests were preserving something, or burying it? Share this with someone who thinks the oldest civilizations had nothing to hide. Next week, we go to the one text that describes what the Babylonian gods said about the human race when they thought no one was listening. What they called us. What they said we were made for. And the line that no mainstream translation puts in the title. The shadow has more to show you. Let the knowing instruct the knowing.